Your Excellency, Mr. Yang Wanming, the President of the China People's Association for Friendship of Foreign Countries, Your Excellency, Mr. Jiang Jingguo, Member of the Standing Committee of the CPPCC National Committee, my brother Henry, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by commending and congratulating CCG and Henry and Mabel for their leadership in really transforming CCG into a global think tank which allows the purposes of intellectual exchange to happen in an open and transparent way. And I also want to commend everybody present here because today's discussion is critically important. Ladies and gentlemen, the world, for the first time post the Second World War, is seeing the gravest interlocking crisis we've ever experienced. We've come out of a health pandemic which exposed the fragility of human health and health systems globally. In fact, it had an economic impact which rivals the Great Depression of the 1930s, an impact of which we will continue to face over years to come unless drastic structural readjustments are not made. We're seeing a climate crisis which looms like the sword of the Damocles over our heads, a climate crisis which is proving to be existential. Look at the hurricanes in Florida and North Carolina, wiping out lives and livelihoods. Look at the effects of floods in Europe. Look at the forest fires that happened in Chongqing in 2022. Climate change sees no borders. The triple planetary crisis is here. Biodiversity loss, air pollution, climate change, further impacting food security and public health. And then we have over 80 conflicts going on all over the world. It's not just Gaza and Ukraine. There are 80 ongoing conflicts. And then we are seeing rising levels of inequality, financial stress across the world. So the effects of what we are seeing now has put the world on a very dangerous trajectory. For the first time post the Second World War, over 120 million people have been displaced as a result of climate change, as a result of instability, as a result of conflict, as a result of impoverishment. Bottom line is the Secretary General of the United Nations has appealed to the world to rescue the Sustainable Development Goals. It is the only hope, it is the only North Star that we have where all 193 member states of the United Nations came together in 2015 to agree on a set of principles, set of development ambitions that would aim to lift people up. The first 5 goals remaining the unfinished business: ending poverty, ending hunger, universal health coverage, quality education, gender equality. The United Nations was founded on 3 pillars: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights. And this is precisely why the United Nations Secretary General called for the Summit of the Future this September at the UN General Assembly in New York. And the purpose of that Summit of the Future was to resurrect, reinvigorate, revive multilateralism, which is completely fractured. Multilateralism is actually in an existentialist crisis by itself. And that is where 193 member states of the United Nations came and agreed upon the fact that we do need to do something about it, and we came up with a Pact of the Future, which has 54 actions across the 5 overarching areas: global governance, peace and security, financing for sustainable development, science, technology, and artificial intelligence. And finally, the most importantly, youth and future generations. This is about all of us. This is about your children and your grandchildren, of what they're going to be inheriting in times to come. And in this context, I would like to quote the United Nations Secretary General when he said that the summit, the Pact of the Future, is about turbocharging sustainable development goals and the Paris Agreement, accelerating a transition away from fossil fuels and securing a peaceful and livable future for everyone on our planet. End of quote. In this context, the United States and China relationship is the most consequential relationship of the 21st century, undeniably. For the Pact of the Future to succeed, we would need the leadership of the United States, of China, of the European Union coming together in the face of the common threats that we confront. Yes, there are geopolitical differences. That is why we have the United Nations as a place for dialogue, as a place for understanding, as a place for accord, as a place for diplomacy. But the geopolitics should not fracture the common threats that we are addressing. If you will recall, ladies and gentlemen, during the Cold War, scientists in Russia, scientists in the United States collaborated to create the vaccine against smallpox. It was possible, which ended smallpox across the world. Collaboration on the climate is going to be absolutely critical. And I see 5 overarching areas that can actually spur and give more velocity to human development. The space of artificial intelligence, the space of quantum computing, the space of semiconductors, fintech, biotech. Imagine if we had the intellectual might of the US, of the EU, of China coming together to address common challenges through these 5 areas of convergence. Not only will we turbocharge the Sustainable Development Goals, but we would actually make humanity progress exponentially. In this very country, where 90% of China was poor in 1979, the per capita GDP of this country was a mere $180. In a matter of 4 decades, not only have they lifted 790 million people out of abject poverty, but also feed 1/5 of the world's population with 9% of the world's arable land. Imagine the possibilities of this knowledge coming together and being shared with other countries still struggling to get out of poverty. Which brings me to another very important point as to why we need to reform the international financial architecture. We cannot continue with the way business as usual of the World Bank and the IMF. I'm sorry, it is unacceptable that an institution that was created back in 1945 has not been able to reform itself and become fit for purpose to the context of the financial crisis that we confront. The world today needs $4 trillion annually, $4 trillion US dollars annually in order to keep the SDGs on track. And it's not that the money is not there, the money is in the market. It is about reforming, restructuring the entire financial architecture and the financial institutions which currently are failing countless developing countries. Today's discussion is extremely important. It is about finding accord. It is not about the differences that we have. This is why the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, launched the boldest reforms of the United Nations system. Reform of the development system to make the United Nations fit for purpose. Me, as the UN resident coordinator to China, as the senior most representative of the Secretary General, I'm determined to respond to that clarion call of making the UN fit for purpose, to reposition the UN to be able to support China's development ambitions, which is what exactly 129 resident coordinators across the world are trying to do. But for us to succeed, we will need the support of all member states in order to move forward on this. Given where we are, there is still reason for optimism. There is still reason for hope. There is still reason for opportunity. Let me conclude with a quote from President Xi Jinping, which he's made at the Boao Forum in 2021. And he said, "By setting sail together, we could ride the wind, break the waves, and brave the journey of 10,000 miles. We may encounter stormy waves and dangerous rapids, but as long as we pool our efforts and keep to the right direction, the giant vessel of human development will stay on an even keel and sail towards a brighter future." Thank you very much. Sheshe.